Welcome to Module 2 of Programming in C. I'm your professor, Professor Fiske, and if you haven't done it already, please like and subscribe. It does wonders for my channel. It allows me to know what you are looking for as far as content and how I can help you to get better in your programming journey. Okay, so let's get started. Today we're going to talk about, last class, or the last two lectures, we went over decision structures. Decision structures such as switch statements and if statements. In this lecture, we're going to talk about iterative statements. Iterative statements are statements which we use to loop over programming blocks that we want, or blocks of programming statements that we want to run over and over again. And there are certain ways we can do this. The first way I'm going to discuss is a while loop. So in a while loop, we can perpetuate certain things that we want to happen. And there are two types of while loops. There is first of all, the while loop, which I'm about to show you now, and then do while loops. The only difference between the two is while loops ask for the Boolean expression first. It asks for the condition first, and it uses that condition to determine whether it needs to run the loop. In the event that that condition is not met, then the loop ends. Whereas with a do while loop, the condition is not run until after the loop is completed. So we're going to take this code here that we've already dealt with, and let's go ahead and let's add a while loop so that we can make it run the way we want it to. Okay, cool. So we can say while, and I'm going to create a condition here that is kind of like an if statement. And then I'm going to show you the industry standard for conditions when we do while loops. So while, we'll say while first number is not -1. Now in most situations you will find that the number -1 is indicative of when we want a program to end or when something is unavailable. For instance, instead of it being null or the response being null when we ask for something like a try parse. Try parse means try to parse this data type into something else. If you can't do it, it'll return a false or a true, or in the past, it returned a -1. The same is true when you wanted to do an index of function. The index of function is a built-in function which checks all the characters in a string, array, and it asks itself a singular question. Do any of these characters match the character we're looking for? If it does, it'll give you back the array index, or the position in the array that is, which is normally numerical. However, if it can't find it, it'll give you a number that you would never find in an array. And once again, we're not doing arrays at the moment, so I don't want to go too deep into arrays, but please understand that the number you will get back if there is nothing that it can find is -1. So we're going to use -1 to stop our program in the event that we need it to stop. So please enter a number between 1 through 10 to exit. Enter -1. Fantastic. So now that we have this expression or this condition, let's see what happens. So all we did was we wrapped our code in the while. Can someone please explain, or do you know why first number is not in the while loop? Well, if you pause the video, and you still have a chance to, the reason why I did not put the variable first number within the while loop is because the while loop has its own scope. The word scope is what we determine these curly braces. I keep clicking the wrong curly brace. This curly brace and that curly brace define the scope of the while loop. This curly brace and that curly brace that curly brace define the scope of this method, all right, or this function. And that's very important because the curly braces tell us whether or not we can access the thing. I'm going to use the word thing. The thing we need to access when we need to access it. Now that means something very interesting. What that means is if I tried to create the variable first number in the while loop and call it here before I created it, before I declared it, before I initialized it, I would get a very interesting error. I'll show you what that error is. I will get an error called that says index reference or object not reference to an instance of an object. Now that's normally in higher level languages because C does not use objects, but it'll basically tell me that this doesn't exist. You didn't declare it yet. If I tried to run it, I'll get the same error. Hey, you didn't declare first number, and so therefore I can't use that. It's almost like you wanting to sit in a chair. You walk up to the table and you try to sit in a chair that doesn't exist. Now that sounds, almost fantastical to you, but that's what you're really asking the computer to do. I want you to use a storage location that I have not declared yet and that I have not assigned a value to. And so basically what the computer does is the computer basically says, I have no idea what you're talking about because that does not exist. So in order for it to exist, we have to initialize it. Luckily for us, we have all this red ticker tape in here that tells us whether it's been initialized or not. And now let's run the program. I'm not going to debug it first. I just want to run it. So when I run it, what should happen is the first number variable will be initialized as an integer or declared as an integer and then assign the value 0. And then the while loop will run. Now notice that we got nothing from the while loop, but if I run this correctly or incorrectly, what it should do is it should return a value, then ask me again to enter a number. It isn't until I enter -1 that it should stop asking me. So if I entered the letter A, ooh, I like that. Enter the letter A and press enter. Oh wow, what happened? I got an infinite loop. Now that's interesting because it seems as though the loop is not stopping. This is saying while first number is not equal to -1, I want you to do all these things. And it seems as though this scanf here is not stopping. It's continuing to run. Let's try that one again. Let's do -1. It ended. Yeah, the number 1 is out of bounds. Please try again. The number is -1. If first number is less than 10, or first number is and. I have a keyboard that has no symbols on it, so I can't see what I'm typing. If first number is greater than 10, or first number is less than 0, the number -1 is out of bounds. This should have fired. This should have never fired. I'm wondering why this second one fired and this first one, they both fired. I only want one to fire. There we go. Cool. Yeah, that's what it was. This was an or, not an and. That's one of those situations that I've talked to you guys about regarding things not working. Okay, so now what I want to do is I want to add a condition for number 1. Number 1 or -1 is not an edge case. It's a happy path. It's something we want our program to do. So if it's something we want our program to do, we shouldn't guesstimate what happens. If first number equals -1, then do something with it, right? Well, what we want to happen is we want the program to exit. So if I wanted to exit this while loop, then what I would need to do is I would need to break it. And this is how you do that. Now this is very nice because what break actually does is, and I'm going to talk about jump statements in the next micro lecture, but basically what break does is it turns around and it tells the program you shouldn't run anymore, stop. Or it tells the loop don't loop anymore. So if I continue and I put in -1, it broke. Nothing else happened. The program ended. You see how run came up? So we'll put a little thing here so the user knows that the program ended. There we go. Always be polite. -1. Thanks for using the program. Goodbye. And now we know that the user has been notified the program ends. Well, this while loop, the way we wrote it here, is not necessarily best practice. Best practice for a while loop isn't to have a Boolean expression here, but to do this. Why is it not allowing use the undeclared identifier true? One second. what I want to do is I just want to use the value of true. So this shouldn't be upset. Use of undeclared identifier true. That shouldn't matter. Because what I want to do is I want the while loop to always be true. As you saw earlier, there was a situation in my loop where it just went on and on and on, and I don't want that. What I really want is for the loop to loop until I tell it to stop using the break. And this one's not making any sense because I should be able to just say true, and it should just allow me to use that as an expression. I could jerry rig this, but I'm not going to do that as of yet. Ah, that's what it is. It's not true, it's 1 because C is very close. Remember I told you in the first module that 0 and 1 and true and false, or 0 and 1, false and true are equal. So 0 equals false, 1 equals true. If you would like to define the value of true in C, we have to use binary, and that is 1. So while the program is true, so while this is true, run the stuff that's inside. So what is going to happen? Well, one of the biggest things we want to avoid in any programming language with our loops is infinite loops. And in this situation, what we're doing is we're creating that infinite loop already so that we can stop it. We know that we have an infinite loop. Now we are the ones that are going to stop this. So if I said run again, and I said -1, it stopped. But if I said run, and I said the number 1, there you go. The number is 1, and then it did the things. So now what I want it to do, I have some, you see how it says the number is 1? Let's go ahead and put some breakpoints in here. Or not breakpoints, but some new lines, so that in the event that this does fire again, we can do something about it. So let's stop again. Let's run. I put some new lines in the strings so that it looks more readable. So we're going to say 5. It says the number is 5. And then what did it do? It came back to the top and it asked me again to enter a number. If I said the number is 11, it says the number 11 is out of bounds. Please try again. Now, what I want to do at the moment is I want to enter a digit. Now, or a alphabet. Now, the one thing I will tell you is that I feel as though the value which is being saved to first number when I enter a letter is not 0, which is why this keeps on looping infinitely. But let's try. So D, and there goes that infinite loop. If you ever want to stop a program very quickly, I just did that from the keyboard. If you ever want to stop a program very quickly because you don't have time to click a button, Control-C. It works in the terminal, it works in your IDE, it works in your runtime environment. So it looks like my letters are not functioning correctly, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to call it there. Our edge case is not met, so this one is a failed test. And going forward, what we'll do is we'll try to fix that one. Okay, so one last thing. We talked about while loops. Let's go ahead and do this in the reverse. Let's say if you want to do this in reverse, you'll do what's called a do while. And a do while looks like this. Oops. Where the do is at the top and the while is at the bottom. Now this allows us to run the code one time without ever trying to determine if the sentinel value is true. Obviously it's not necessary if we're always making this true, but in the event we had a sentinel here that we wanted to check a Boolean expression, a what if that we wanted to check here, we might not want to check it in the beginning, especially if you're displaying a menu and you want them to use a menu. You'd probably do a do while or something like that. I normally put the menu here before the while loop and then loop the while. Like let's say you're doing a text-based game, you would put the menu before the while, and then any other menu you had in the game would also be in the while loop or in a function called by the while loop. And this works the same way. It'll run the code, and then if I said 5, it'll do the same thing as before. The only difference is it never tried to check to see if this is true or not. What it did was it ran the code first, and then it checked. So do, and then execute the while, and that's it. I'm going to stop this here. A lot of these lectures that I've been talking to you guys about have been a little more long-winded than I wanted them to be because these are micro lectures. So I'm going to stop here, and I'm going to say, once again, if you haven't liked or subscribed, please do so. And as I say in all my videos, good luck, have fun, ciao.